about variability and how your data is distributed. So on 13.1, we're going to look over patterns in data. So let's just focus on maybe where there are gaps, maybe where it peaks, and we're going to use dot plots, histograms, and we're going to introduce some other things in this chapter. So for this one, we're just going to look at how your data is distributed. So unlock the problem. Many lakes and ponds contain freshwater fish species such as bass, pike, bluegill, and trout. Jacob and his friends went fishing at a nearby lake. The dot plot shows the sizes of the fish that the friends caught. The lengths are rounded to the nearest inch. What patterns do you see in the data? So what this is saying is there was one fish that was 5 inches long, 3 fish that were 6 inches long, 2 fish that were 7 inches long, so on and so forth, okay? So over here it says circle any spaces with no data. So as we can see, these spaces have no data. And then place a box around any groups of data. So there's a grouping here, and there's a grouping here. All right, so a gap is an interval that contains no data. So obviously the gap is right here from 8 to 10. So that means there were no fish from 8 inches to 10 inches long. A cluster is a group of data points that lie within a small interval. So this is a cluster of data here from 5 to 7. And then you have your other cluster on the other side of your gap from 11 to 14. So essentially there were no fish from 8 to 10 inches long, and there were 2 clusters of fish from 5 to 7 inches long, and from 11 to 14 inches long. Okay? So not too hard. In summary then, all you would put, text box, is the data ranges from 5 to 14 inches. There is a gap from 8 to 10 inches. And 2 clusters from 5 to 7 and 11 to 14. So then, oftentimes we can make conclusions about a set of data. So it's asking what conclusions could be made about this set of data. Remember, this set of data is telling us about fish that were caught. So a conclusion we could make is there might have been 2 different types of fish species because there are 2 distinct clusters. Okay? Turning over to the next page, we can also use a histogram to summarize our data. So let's read the example. Erica made this histogram to show the weights of the pumpkins grown at her father's farm in October. What pattern do you see in the data? So here are the weights. So this is from 0 to 10 pounds, and it goes all the way up to 50 pounds. So most of the pumpkins harvested from her father's farm are from 21 to 30 pounds. So this histogram has 1 peak. Has 1 peak. And the interval that representing the greatest number of pumpkins for weights is between 21 and 30. That is the peak, okay? Step 2 says describe how the data changes. So from 0 to 21, it increases. And then from 0 to 21 pounds, and then from 31 to 50 pounds, it decreases. their symmetry. So boys and girls, symmetry is when something is folded in half, it looks the same on both sides. So when we're talking about graph, symmetry doesn't have to necessarily be perfect, because if you were to fold this data in half, 41 and this one wouldn't exactly line up, but they're pretty close. Okay, so we drew our line through the middle. So if I draw a vertical line through the interval for 21 to 30 pounds, you can see that this side and this side are pretty close together. So we would say that the histogram has symmetry. Okay? And so the data values increase to one peak in the interval for 21 to 30 pounds and then decreases. And the data set has symmetry. All right, so if we look at on your, or share and show, it says the dot plot shows the number of paintings students in the art club displayed at the art show. Use the dot plot. Does the dot plot contain any gaps? It does, because our data set goes from 1 to 7. And we have a gap from 5 to 6, where more than one interval is not shown. And then it says identify any clusters. Well, 1 to 4 is a cluster. 7 would not be considered a cluster because there's only one part of data there. So in summary, we could say that the data ranges from 1 to 7. There is a gap at 5 to 6 and a large cluster from 1 to 4. Okay guys, that is it on my end. If you have questions, log into your Teams meeting or shoot us an email. Have a good day.